Hello class, welcome to the first video in the series. In this series we're going to be talking about how to create an architectural asset. This architectural asset is going to be something that is modular, which means it can be used multiple times in a scene in many different ways. So let's take a look at some of the stuff I'm talking about. So this is a sci-fi project that I found over Google, just something that I thought was really cool and interesting. And I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and start creating this, and I'm going to walk you guys through my process. But let's take a quick look at what we're going to be working at here. So there's a lot of repetition in the design here, but it's done in such a way that it's not boring, which is pretty cool. So what's happening here is we have a few objects. We have, let's see here. We have these pipes down here, these floorboards, these things coming up what I believe are lights, these things on the walls. You can see that these are all repeated over and over and over again. And what it does is it creates a hallway for us. So what I think I'm going to do is create this hallway really quickly. So let's go ahead and open up Maya. So the first thing I want to do is when I'm creating any type of architectural asset, I want to make sure that I'm working in the correct scale, and I want to make sure that everything is sized up the way it should be. So when you start Maya by default, you'll see a grid space here, and this grid space is based off of centimeters. So that means every single one of these spaces is a square centimeter. And because I'm going to be working in a very large format, it's going to be a hallway which you can walk down, I want to make sure that this is set to something a little bigger. So centimeters is too small, so let's set it to meters. I'm going to go up into Window, Settings and Preferences, and then down here on the left I'm going to go to Settings, and then there's this working units right here. I'm going to switch it from centimeters to meters. And as you can see, the grid space just popped right up. And then the next thing I want to do is create a shape which is analogous to the size of a human being. So so now that I've created this shape in this meter space, this is 1 meter cubed. So what I want to do is create something that's 2 meters tall. So just like that. And then I'm going to scale it down so it's a bit more proportional to a person. So I have this character now which is 2 meters tall, which is around 6 feet. It's kind of like a standard video game height. So now I can start creating stuff around it. And I'm going to keep the scale out so that I can always remember how big it is, or how larger a scene is compared to it. So the first thing I want to do is I think what I'll do is go from largest to smallest. So the first largest piece in this scene is the circular piece itself. It's like a cylinder, right? And we can try and break this up into pieces. It looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-sided faces. 12-sided cylinder. So I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to leave it scale alone for a moment, but I want to go over here to the inputs and switch my axis, my subdivisions from 20 to 12. And then that looks pretty good from the get-go, so I'm going to hold down J and rotate. And then the next thing I want to do is get rid of all these faces because they're not doing me any good in this hallway, so I'm going to select these 2 end caps and then delete them. The next thing I want to do is start scaling this piece up. And I want to bring it up a little bit because I know the platform is not quite in the middle of this shape. It's kind of near the bottom. So I'm going to imagine that this guy's kind of he's already on it. So that looks about right. And then I'm going to scale this up to about that size. And that should give us enough room as far as interior space. The next thing we need to do is reverse the normals, the face normals. So right now we're rendering the outsides of these faces. And normally that's what we want because this is just an object which we're looking down at. But because we're going to be inside of it, we want the other sides of these faces to render. So the way to do that is just select all the faces that you want to flip, go under normals, and then hit the reverse button. So now you see the outside is much darker and the inside is shaded more like how it should. Alright, so I'm going to select this and come down here in my channel box, and I'm going to hit layers and then create a layer from selected. So this is similar to what a Photoshop layer does. You can just hide it, which is nice. So I'm going to do that and then focus on some other portions. I think the first thing I want to go ahead and try to make is this platform which goes across here. And as you can see, each one of these is its own separate piece. So all I need to do is create one of these. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll create a box, and it looks a little too narrow for me right now, so I'm going to make this 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters. Yep, that's looking a little bit more like how I would expect it. And then the image, it looks like it's got some beveled edges. Yep, so the edges are definitely beveled. So let me go ahead and grab those, and it's these outside edges. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and bevel those. I hold down Shift and right click, bevel edge. And as you can see, the beveled edges are correct scale. So if I was to bevel this size of an object, something that's 1.5 meters across by 1.5 meters across in the centimeter scale, without changing that up here, our bevel would have been really, really small, and that's not what we want. So that's why another reason we're working in meters. So I'm going to hit the poly bevel in my channel box again to pull out some more options. I'm going to decrease my fraction to like a 0.2. Maybe I'll bring that down even to like a 0.1. Yeah, that's more like it. Alright, and the next thing I want to do is grab my face, because there's like a little extrusion, there's like a little lip on that piece, so something like that, and then I'm going to hit G to repeat my last function, which was extrude, and I'm going to pull this down just like that. Cool, so I have my first tile. There is a problem though. Let me isolate this. The problem is this face right now is an n-gon. You can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 edges. So what we need to do is cut this up. So I'm going to grab my tool, my multi-cut tool, and I'm going to connect this vert to this vert. I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to do the same thing on this end. That vert to that one. Enter. And now what you can see is that we have 3 four-sided faces. And that's all we need. I think what I'm going to do is actually grab all these faces. I'm going to scale them down a tad so that we have a little bit more interesting geometry going on. It's not just straight down. Alright, so that looks pretty good to me. I think the next thing I want to do is create next thing I want to create, I think, is going to be these faces, these portions on the wall. So that's easy. It looks like just a box with some beveled edges, and the bottom is a little wider than the top. And then there's an inset, and then there's some funky geometry going on in there too. So let me do that real quick. And I'm going to create a new box. And I'm still in isolate select, so I gotta get out of that. So I'm gonna bring this over to the side a little bit by holding down the X key. It'll just snap to the grid. Move it out of the side. And first, let me scale this down so it's a little bit more like what it should be, and make sure it's scaled this way. And I'm gonna grab the bottom face and stretch that out, similar to what we see in the image. And then the next thing I want to do is bevel these edges. Oh, if you've noticed that, so I turned autosave on. I did this video once before and it totally crashed on me, so I lost all that work. But we're gonna keep autosave on for now. Hopefully we'll avoid some problems like that. So the next thing we want to do is bevel these edges, so I'm gonna select them real quick, make these nice and smooth, and I'm gonna hold down Shift, right click, bevel edge. Oops, sorry about that. Right click, bevel edge, and you know what? I'm going to undo that. I'm going to bevel edge and then bring out the options box. And instead of doing one segment, I'm going to pump this up to 3, and you'll see what happens. So that's pretty cool. What it did is it gave me these nice, soft, rounded edges, and I think that looks much better. So the next thing I want to do is a little trick to save us some time. I'm going to delete all these faces on top, as well as the one on the bottom, because we don't need those. And what I'm going to do is grab these edges around this lip, and I'm going to extrude them in. And, well, that kind of works. I'll pull it up some. And then I'm going to hit the G key to repeat last function, and I'm going to extrude down. And I'm going to actually pull this in also. Alright, that looks pretty good. It's kind of like a port or like a window at the moment. The next thing I want to do is create that geometry which is inside. And it's got some interesting things going on there. So let's see if we can recreate that. First thing I'm going to have is a box. And actually what I'm going to do is select all the faces except the top one and delete them. Now I'm going to bring this one down. And I'm actually going to go up into Modify and Center Pivot. So that moved my pivot point to the exact center of this object. So now I can just smack it right into the middle. Because I'm still working on the grid, this is still in the middle of one of these squares also. I know that this is in the middle of this object. So I'm going to move it down, and I'm going to scale it up so it kind of envelops this whole space. Now it's working exactly like I thought it would. So now what we have is two separate pieces. We have a face, like this, and then this piece that goes around it. Now this is A-okay. It's not a big deal to do something like this. So don't worry if you have intersecting objects. It happens more often than you might think. So the next thing I want to do is go into my Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to bring up the options for that. And I'm going to use multiple edge loops, and I'm going to first make sure I can see my... Sorry about that. See my my mesh, and I'm going to go into two loops so that I can get something like that. And I'm going to grab those edges and scale it in, and I think that looks pretty good. It's about broken up into thirds. And the next thing I'm going to do is extrude this, pull it up, and you can see I have a problem now. It's starting to extrude past the inside of that, but that's okay. I might even make that a design feature, so if I do something like that, I think that looks pretty interesting. Alright, it also looked like it had a couple other things going on. It looks like it has these inserts, so let's do that real quick. The way I would approach this, and actually I'm going to undo this whole edge thing. I'm going to actually move these farther back. Something like that, and then I'm going to isolate this for a moment, and then grab these faces that are inside the rest of the mesh and delete them because I don't need them. And that'll save us some time on inserting UVs as well. So I'm going to go back into my Insert Edge Loop tool, and then I'm going to bump this up to 8 and click on that. You know what? 8's overdoing it. Let's do 6. Alright, that works. Now here's a little trick. So what I'm going to do is grab each one of these edge loops, and then I'm going to bevel. And what that did is basically just doubled this, but if I pull this bevel down from a 0.5 fraction to like a 0.1, now you can see that I have double lines going across this whole thing. And now what I'm going to do with this is grab all of these edges, oops, I'm sorry about that, all of these, and then I'm going to extrude these all down. So I'm now left with a pretty interesting shape. I'm going to turn on ambient occlusion real quick, just so we can see more of that. And that's pretty cool. I like it. So I'm going to select both of those meshes now, and I'm going to go and combine them under Mesh Combine. And you can see after I've done that, the manipulator is now moved straight to the origin. That happens whenever you combine two objects. So I have to go up into Modify and then Center Pivot once more. And now it's centered. Perfect. So I'm going to go and delete my histories because I've got some stuff which I don't need. Deleted history. If that was a little too fast, all we do is go into Edit, delete all by type, and History. And that way we make sure our computer runs nice and quick. Alright, so I guess the idea behind these are going to be every time we duplicate this along the road or whatever, we'll have a duplicate of this as well. So let's go ahead and put this into place. I'm going to grab it real quick and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so it's facing up and down. I'm going to pull it up and drag it into my wall. I'm kind of running into this problem where it's not quite long enough yet. So what I can do is just grab this edge loop around, and it's grabbing the whole thing. Oh, it looks like I have some faces on the back which I can get rid of. Don't need those. Alright, so now I can just grab this edge loop, which wraps all the way around, and just make sure it breaks through. Alright, so really quickly we have the beginnings of our platform, and we have kind of a weird wall thing. Weird wall thing, yes. Excellent description. Alright, so that's something that we can use somewhere else also, so it's kind of a nice modular design piece. Let's see, the next thing we want to create in this portion is, let's create these things down here. So I'm going to zoom out of that, and that can be done super simply. I'm going to grab a box like this, I drag it down to where I think it's about the right size. I'm going to grab this edge and pull it down. Make sure that it's not intersecting too far through the mesh. Vertex, I'm going to move this a little closer also. Actually, you know what? I'm going to grab this face, this back one, and I'm going to extrude it. I'm going to pull it back, and I'm going to pull it up. So it's not exactly like what we were seeing, but I think this is going to be close enough for now. So I'm going to grab this and make it a little narrow. Oops. A little more narrow. And I might even grab this edge and bring it forward a little bit and down. Well, that's cool. I think that's interesting looking. And I can actually go ahead and delete these faces on the back side because they're also not doing us any good. So I'll delete those. And I think that's good for now. Really quick, really simple design. And the next piece is going to be a little bit more tricky because it's going to be this piece that wraps around. And to do that, we're going to be using a new technique. And this technique is called extruding along an edge. Or, I'm sorry, extruding along a curve. So what I'm doing is creating a box which is going to act as the base. And I know that started somewhere around here. So I think that's a good place to start. And the next thing I want to do is go into my front view. So I'm looking at the inside of this now, and I have the base of my box, and I'm going to come up here into curves up here at the very top and use this. So this is a curve based off of the NURBS principles, which means it's based off mathematics essentially. I clicked on this button so that I could see my tube around, and what this curve is going to do for me is going to make a path around the shape that I want to create, and then I'm going to extrude the face along this. So let's take a look. I'm going to start the very beginning of this edge, or I'm sorry, I keep calling it edge, it's curve. So very beginning of this curve, right at the base of this face. And then I'm going to bring it up, and then I'm going to yes, thank you. I got in the way that time. Let's try that again. Make sure I get real close. See, right here, right here. And I'm not too worried about getting this exactly perfect because I have the opportunity to actually change this in a moment. So I get something that I think is roughly right, and I can hit enter. And if I right click on this now, just like right-clicking on any object gives me the object properties. If I right-click on the control line, I can get the control vertices. So these work just like normal vertices, except they affect the way this line works. So I'm just going to start placing these and like really getting the shape right. Bring that out a little bit and this out. Alright, it's kind of like a weird question mark. Alright, so now that that's done, let me come back into perspective. And as you can see, when I created this in the front view, I've only got access to two planes, the up and the Y and the X. And because of that, it created the Z, it put it on the Z axis right on the center line, which is actually exactly where our object is. So that's perfect for us. So what you want to do is have the end of this line end up in the middle of the face that we're extruding. So the next thing I can do is go into face mode and select the face I want to extrude. And then I want to marquee select over my curve. And then basically what I just did is I've selected my face and I've selected the curve together. So the next thing I want to do is just a normal extrusion. So I hold down Shift, right click, and then go down here to extrude face. So I'm going to let go, and you can see that that doesn't look anything like what we want. So let's fix that real quick. If we come over here to the right and we scroll down to divisions, and I'm over here now, I've clicked on divisions and I'm going to middle mouse over somewhere in the world over here, and you'll see that I now have this little arrows. These little arrows, and what these allow me to do is change the number of divisions dynamically. So if I drag to the right, you'll start to see that it starts adding in more faces. Pretty cool. So I think I'm going to go to 7. I think that looks pretty good. Except we're getting a little bit of crunching over here. You can see that it doesn't look quite right. So let me hide this again. And let me show you something really cool about this. I'm going to go into X-ray mode with this button right here. And the really cool thing about this is if I marquee select the edge, and then I'm off to the side where I'm not over any geometry, and I right click and I go into control vertex, I can actually still control these. So that's pretty cool. It's actually just about where I want it, but I think what I want to do is merge these verts together. So I don't want, oh actually before I do that, let me change this taper. So in the extrude over here in the inputs in your channel box, you can see that there's more than just divisions. There's stuff like twist and taper, and what I want to do is choose taper, and I want it to taper in at the top, just like that, because that's what it does in our reference. Alright, so that looks pretty good. The last thing I want to do is select my mesh and go into edit, delete by type, and then history. So now my curves has no relationship to that rest of that mesh. So I'm just going to create a new layer for this curve just in case I need to use it later, but I'm going to hide it right now. Alright, so like I was saying, I want to merge these verts together so that I'm not getting this weird thing going on right here. So I can just go into right click and merge vertex tool, merge vertex tool, and then snap and snap. Alright, that's pretty much all we need for that. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this face on the bottom. Don't need it. Alright, and the next thing I want to do is add the light fixtures to this. It looks like a little semicircle with a hole in the middle. We actually have a shape for that, which is really cool. This shape right here, which is the polygon pipe. So if I click on it real quick and move it out of the way so I can actually work on it, I'm going to go into the inputs and change my subdivisions from 20 to something more manageable like 12. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go to 14, I think. Yes. And the reason I did that is so that two of the top faces, so these two, are completely flat. And the reason being, I'm going to go into vertex mode, the vertex mode, and I'm going to select half of the verts in this mesh, and I'm going to drag it out. Pretty cool. So pretty much automatically we get the shape that we're looking for. I'm going to scale it down, and actually just for a little bit of fun, I'm going to select these two edges and bevel them down. So it looks a little bit more like a fluorescent light. I can even go into the object mode and go into my normals and soften the edges so they look nice and soft. Except they don't look quite right on the back end, so I'm going to go through these edges and make those hard edges. Normals, hard edge. And you'll see what that did is it stopped that shadowing effect from going. So now it's like a flat back, which is cool. Alright, so I've got a little problem right now with this. The manipulator's way over here where I left it, but I need to change that. So I'm going to go into Modify, Center Pivot. So I can just scale it way, way, way down because that's way too big of a light for us. And if I hold down the V key and I start moving this around, it'll snap to the verts. And that's something I do to kind of get it in the right ballpark. I'm going to rotate this around. Oops. Rotate this around. I'm using the J key to snap my angles. And then I'll rotate around. And then I want to do something else with my manipulator. This is a nice technique. So if I double click on the Move tool, you'll see that there's this Move Axis at the very top of all these options. If you click Object, what that's going to do is change how this is oriented. So World, Object. So I'm going to move this in object space so it's much easier to move around. I might bring that in a little bit. And I'm not too worried about a bracket at this point. This is just really, really simple stuff. And I think that looks pretty good. Alright, where are we at next? Let me save real quick. Sorry about that. 3D comp. Maya. Oops. Hallway. As I said, I was already doing that once before. Crashed. Didn't save enough. Lost everything. Alright. So, what else do we have in this hallway? Let's take a look. Well, we've got this handrail, which is something we can work on in a minute. We've got some more shapes up here. That would be super fast to do, so let's go ahead and do that. I will open up this real quick, and I'm going to create a new square, or cube rather, and I'm going to turn off ambient occlusion. So you can see if you're turn on ambient occlusion and you're looking on the reverse of the normals, it makes everything blacked out. So if I turn those off real quick, it'll go away. So I'm going to scale this in. And I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to throw it right in one of these corners. Grab my verts. And just really quickly throw in some more shapes. Alright, that's pretty close to what I want. And what I can do now is delete these faces I don't need. And I can grab these verts over here, kind of pull them down so that I don't have too much of this sticking out the back. We don't want to waste stuff. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I have another piece which I can just duplicate and move along. There's this track system on the top in the image. I think I'm going to wait to do that. Save. I'm getting paranoid about it now. Oh, some pipes. Let's create a new pipe. I'm going to create a cylinder, and I'm going to change it to 12. And I'm going to rotate it. Kind of move it into place. I'll leave it there for now. I'm not sure if that's going to work out in the long run, but it might surprise us. All right, so I just scaled that up real quick. Super simple pipe. It looks like these edges are. Sorry, I was displaying a weird render. These edges are rendering hard right now, so I want to soften those up by just selecting them all, going to normals and soften edge. So now it's nice and soft. Oh, excuse me, a little bit of neck crack. Okay, so what's the next thing we want? I guess the last thing to do would be the railing, but let's wait to do that. Let's go ahead and start setting this stuff up. So I'm going to go into my right view. What I'm going to do is select both my floorboard and this wall piece, and I'm going to duplicate it and move it along. Duplicate, move it along. Just going to keep going down. I'm not worried about precise measurements right now. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. This is just a test to make sure that everything's kind of the right size. We still have to do all the UV unwrapping and everything, so I eventually have to redo this. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I've created a walkway now, and I have these ornate wall pieces, and I want to make sure that these are on also the other side, so I can duplicate and rotate the entire group, holding down J, rotating 180 degrees, and I'm going to move these across to here. Very cool. So I'll turn off this mode and you can take a look inside. That's starting to look pretty good. The next thing I want to do is combine this light and the actual light bulb. So I'll go into mesh and combine. And when I did that, it moved the locator once again straight to the origin. But in this case, it's actually a really good thing. So I'm going to go back into the right view. And what I want to do is duplicate this on every other one of these. So I'm going to duplicate, move it along, duplicate, move it along. And I'm going to grab both of these to save some time and move them along down this way. Alright, so now I've got lights going down the entire length. And what I'm going to do is just grab all of these, grab all of these, duplicate, and watch this. Because all the pivot points are right in the middle, bam. Couldn't have been any easier. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is move this one, and what I think I'm going to do is do it on the other portion, so like wherever there isn't a light post. So I'll go back into my right view, kind of line these up, duplicate, not quite as many of these, almost there. Alright. And these actually don't have their pivot points on the center, so what I think I'm going to do this time, is combine all these. So I'm going to go into mesh, combine. Now they're all one piece, so all I have to do now is duplicate and rotate 180 degrees. So now you can see I'm running into this problem about this pipe, so I can kind of move this into place now that I know where things are going. Somewhere about there. Yeah, it looks alright. Duplicate it, move it over to this side. Yeah, that works. Alright. Oh, I forgot about this guy. So let me go to the right again. And I'm going to make these... I go to the left view. Okay, that seems to work better for some reason. I'm going to make these align with the not lights again. The not lights. All right. Oops. Duplicate. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with these as those other ones. I'm going to combine them. Mesh, combine. And I'm going to duplicate and rotate all the way around. So now we've got some pretty interesting stuff going on in this scene. As you can see, I could keep going and going and going. I could start really getting into the detail in this, add the railings and stuff. I'm not going to make you guys watch that whole process. I don't want you to have to sit and watch this video for an hour and a half or whatever. So this is the idea of modular generation. So we have all these objects, and they're broken up into single pieces, which we can use over and over and over again to make something like a hallway or something even larger. So with that, I am going to save, and we're going to call the modeling portion of this done. One technique before we finish, I didn't get to it this time, so I'm going to show you real quick. So I'm going to extrude a face, hit G to extrude a face again, hit G to extrude a face again, and I just created a really simple door frame or an arch. So if I was to grab this edge and do bevel, double click on my bevel to get some more segments. 4. Alright, we get a nice kind of smooth bevel there now, and next thing I need to do is make sure that these verts are better connected, so that's fine. That looks better. And you can see really quickly what I did is just create a bunch of little triangles. But I still have some quads, and I can even go so far as to move these over as well. Oh, got some weirdo stuff back here. Alright, so I just created a really simple archway. What I'm going to do is actually duplicate it so that we have the other half on the other side. So this is a really cool technique that allows you to only have to create one side of something. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. The first way is to just sit here and model half of something like we just did. And then what you do is hit insert, and that'll let you move your manipulator, and I'm going to hold down the V key, and that'll let me snap to vertices. Hit insert again. I'm going to go up into modify and then freeze transformations, and what this is going to do is it's going to zero out all this data right here. So watch this. Awesome. And then I need to go into edit, delete all by type, history, just to be sure. So now if I hit Control D, I just duplicated it, and what I want to do is subtract the scale in one direction. So this would be in the X direction, -1, and you'll see we have a problem right now. Half of this is black and half of it's gray. So how do we fix that? Well, these faces have been reversed. But I noticed something kind of weird with Maya 2015. If we grab this face, or this object and this object, and we go into Mesh, Combine, it automatically flips these faces. So I'll go into Object Mode, and a way to view face normals is to go into Display, Polygons, and then boop, boop, face normals. So you see now that actually all these face normals are pointed inwards. And the reason I can tell that is that there's these tiny little dots in the middle of every face. Actually, nope, I think they might just be really small. So if I go to display, polygons, there's a way to change the size of those. Right now it's a little too small to see. Polygons, face normal, normal size. So I just increased this way up, but you can see now there's these little green lines poking out. So before, when these were black, the normals were reversed. So I'll undo all this before we flipped. And I'll do the same thing I did before. Display, polygons, and then face normals. So it looks like this is just another one of those weird quirks. So the face normals are actually pointing the right direction, but it's still rendering black. It used to be where what would happen is when you reverse the scale of something like this, it would reverse the normals. Apparently they fixed that, but they haven't stopped it from shading black. So all we have to do is combine these two, mesh, combine, and we should be good. Alright, so that was the first way to basically duplicate something, and now we have like a little hallway here. And if you wanted to, you could go into vertex mode, grab all those. So I'm grabbing half of those and just, and now we have a tunnel. Let me turn off face normals, and you can see it was just that easy. Another really cool way, and this is more of an advanced trick, allows you to see the other side as you're working on the first side. So I'm going to delete all this real quick. I'm going to move my manipulator again, my pivot point. And now what I want to do is go into edit, and then duplicate special down here. So also is Control-Shift-D will work. So if I click on this extra box, I'm going to be given some options. So I'm going to go into edit and reset. So this is what you'll normally see. And what we want to do is not just create a copy. So a copy would just be a duplicate. What I want to do is create an instance. So what that means is when I change something on one side, it'll change it on the other side. So I'll hit instance, and then I want to change the scale. Just like I was doing before over here, I was setting the scale to -1 to flip it to the other side. I do the same thing down here. So that would be -1 in the X. They don't label them, which is a little annoying, but it's X, Y, Z. So scale is going to be -1 in the X. Hit apply, and you'll see that I still get the same problem where it's rendering black. The way that we can get around that for now is by going into lighting up here, and then go to two-sided lighting, and that'll allow us to see that. So the really cool thing about an instance is if I go into vertex mode, look what happens. Everything is mirrored. So this is a really powerful tool. So you can work on one side while the other one's just copying exactly what you're doing, and it'll help you along immensely. So after you're all done, you just select both of them, go into mesh, and combine. And now they're just one object. Alright, so that was it really quickly. Modularity. Big deal. It's super simple to create an interesting looking scene very quickly. Just a couple objects duplicated and moved across the line. It looks great. Mirroring an object. Just think about it. You only have to ever model half of something, so long as it's something that's symmetrical and ornate. So I wouldn't recommend doing it for like random pieces. But if you're going to be doing something like an archway, that'll definitely save you a lot of time. Alright, so that's going to be it for this portion. The next portion we're going to be talking about UVs and how to unwrap them a little bit more depth so that we get a better understanding of some of the more useful techniques. And I guess I'll see you then. Good luck, guys.